Hey, Fed heads, welcome to another episode of Cigar Chat on Cigar Federation. I'm your host, Tripp, here with my co-host, John, the cigar surgeon. John, how you doing today?
Good, buddy. It's a little on the chilly side. I wish I had some of that Florida weather up here, but we're making do. We're lighting cigars. We're talking to a good guest tonight, so it's not all bad. It's not all bad.
And our guest tonight is Jeff Borysiewicz from Corona Cigar Company and kind of proprietor of Florida Sungrown tobacco.
How you doing,
Jeff? How you doing?
Fantastic. Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh, of course. And of course, this is Cigar Chat. We're broadcast live on Facebook and around the world on the Armed Forces Radio Network. Also available as a podcast or as a rebroadcast on YouTube. So if you can't catch the whole show, feel free to come back and catch it on YouTube. And so Jeff, so let's start off by just talking a little bit about what your involvement in the industry is, because you've got your hands in a lot of different pies across the industry.
Well, I'm a retailer. I own Corona Cigar Company in Orlando, which has 3 very large retail stores and cigar bars in Orlando, and then a Davidoff store in Tampa. So we've been in the retail business since 1996, and we also have been in the online business since 1998. And we started out as a mail order catalog in 96, and we've been in business now for going on 21 years here, and it's been a great experience and a great ride. Let's put it that way. And 2013, we started a farming project in Claremont, Florida, growing Florida cigar tobacco, bringing that back after basically a 40-year hiatus, and we're not the first to do it. It had been done for close to 200 years, but it became economically impossible to grow cigar tobacco in Florida. But as a retailer, as a very large retailer, it sells a lot of cigars. We were able to take use Corona Cigar as the catalyst to have a farm and to grow tobacco and make the investment was required. And I'll tell you right now, growing cigar tobacco is we call it a nonprofit but at the same time, after 5-6 years, the idea is to make it sustainable so that it's not not losing money every single year. They say there's the easiest way to make $1 million in the cigar industry, start off with 2. But in the cigar tobacco world, it's even more difficult because there's a tremendous amount of risk involved, and it takes a long time before you see even any cigars that come out of your off from your crop. So, but it's important to me personally. It was important to do these things. There's a political side to this too. When I started the farm, we mentioned earlier before the introduction of the show that my involvement with Cigar Rights of America, I was involved with that for 8 years as the chairman and co-founder of it. And there were some reasons that when we were up in Washington talking about the importance of the premium cigar industry and how many jobs and how many shops and things like that, we would talk about how many jobs are in Nicaragua and Dominican Republic and Honduras. And our elected officials would look you square in the eye and said, I don't care about those jobs. I need to know how many American jobs we're talking about, how many American cigar shops we're talking about, how many American farms, how many American manufacturers. And the only place that was growing cigar tobacco at the time that was being used is in Connecticut. And I got to tell you, the guys in Connecticut, the last thing they want to do is get involved in politics. And there's a reason behind that too, because the only time they ever saw anybody from the government was there to give them a hard time, give them a hard time about some labor regulation or farming regulation, whatever it is. So anyway, that's a 2-minute introduction for you. But that gives you a little bit of a, sort of a 30,000 foot view of what we're doing.
Well, I guess, hopping right into the Florida Sungrown, project, as you put it, I have to imagine, if you're growing tobacco in Nicaragua, especially around, Esteli, Jalapa, Condega, at the end of the day, if you're having a rough harvest, or it's like one of those things. You don't have to go very far to find another tobacco farmer. Florida, which used to have, I don't know, 550 some odd tobacco growers, is down to like 43 tobacco farmers. So it's not.
Yeah, those are cigarette.
Those are cigarette.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which the plant itself, this when you have what's called dark tobacco, which is your cigar tobacco, and your bright tobacco, which is the cigarette tobacco, the plants themselves actually grow quite the same. However, the methods of harvesting and the methods, when it comes to quality and everything else, are totally different, and fermentation, all that other stuff. But I will say this: those 40 or so farmers that still grow cigarette tobacco in Florida, without having, listen, I'm not a big fan of cigarettes, but at the same time, I agree with these guys that grow cigarette tobacco. They don't make any money either. But if it wasn't for, they really don't. I mean, they get like $4 a pound for their tobacco. And so, but be honest with you, most farmers don't make money on anything they do. It's very difficult to make money in agriculture. But anyway, if it wasn't for if we didn't have cigarette tobacco farms in America, it would be impossible to grow cigar tobacco in America. Now, I'll tell you why. Because everything that we do on a farm, every fertilizer, every chemical, every herbicide, and pesticide, anything like that, it all goes through the FDA and the EPA. Mm-hmm. So, and it has to be labeled. These things are handled almost like prescription drugs. So we can't even buy, let's say, an herbicide or a fungicide or anything like that if it's not labeled for tobacco. So when you have a company like Syngenta or Monsanto or whatever, DuPont or Bayer, they won't, if there's not enough farmers to buy the product, they're not going to spend the money to have it tested and labeled every year by the FDA. Sort of like what we're seeing with the cigars under FDA regulation. If you're a small boutique manufacturer, there's no way you're going to send your cigars in and be able to have them tested when you don't even sell enough cigars to even cover a fraction of the cost of what it takes to have them approved. So the same thing kind of falls in agriculture too.
Makes sense. It's just not economically viable.
Yeah. And by the way, John, they grew cigar tobacco in Canada too. One thing I did is when I got started on this project, the only farmers that grew cigar tobacco in Florida, they're all dead. So because they were doing it from the 70s. The last crop was 1977, and the only guys that were growing it back then were old guys, just trying to hang on to their their little farm.
Yeah.
So I studied. Google was my friend. I read every document there was, and believe it or not, there's tremendous information on growing cigar tobacco in America. However, those documents are 100 to 125 years old, because remember, cigarettes weren't even invented in 1900. They didn't exist. Everything was cigars, right? That's why when you watch the spaghetti westerns, everybody's smoking a cigar, and they're all smoking cigars. You don't see them smoking cigarettes. So there were cigar factories all over America. There were cigar tobacco farmers from Connecticut to Maryland, Florida. There was in Wisconsin. There was a lot of cigar tobacco farms, and so the United States Department of Agriculture would do tons of studies and write these really good books on how modern. Well, they called it modern cultivation. I laugh because they talk about a hoe being a modern cultivation. And a plow is crazy. A plow was considered modern. So they hadn't even invented tractors yet. But those are the books that I had to study and to really look at the way tobacco was grown in Florida. Because one thing about growing cigar tobacco is you can take, trust me, I've had tons of help from guys from Cuba to Nicaragua to Honduras, Dominican Republic, and Kentucky and Connecticut, everyone, and Mexico. So every one of those guys that grow tobacco have always been there to help, right? But there's a difference. When you do something in Nicaragua, you try to do it in Florida, you might ruin everything. If you try to do it like they do in Connecticut and do it here, you might ruin everything. Because we have different climates, different growing seasons, different altitudes, and we had to figure this stuff out on our own, but we did.
I mean, it sounds like a labor of love. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people out there think, well, Jeff's going to make a bunch of money off the tobacco and off the cigars. But I mean, like you said, farming, just regular old farming is not a money maker. I mean, let alone trying to revitalize the entire cigar growing industry in Florida. I mean, that's an uphill battle if I ever heard one.
Well,
Yeah.
one of the interesting things on the money part is that I remember when in 2013, I still have the email, John Oliva, who grows tobacco in Ecuador and used to grow tobacco in Florida too, by the way, one of the largest brokers and growers of tobacco. And so this guy knew about growing tobacco in Florida. And he said, remember Eric Newman said, talk to John Oliva, because they used to buy tobacco from Florida too. Remember, the Newmans have a factory in Ybor City, and they've been around for 125 years.
Yep.
So, and when the Cuban embargo occurred, Florida came to the rescue with cigar tobacco in the 60s. But anyway, he was talking to John Oliva about it. So I remember sending John Oliva an email, and John wrote back, "You're crazy. Don't do it. You're gonna." He goes, "Let me tell you, it's going to cost you $22,000 an acre to grow it." And
Wow.
he goes, there's no way you can compete when it's costing that much money to grow tobacco.
Yeah.
And you know what? The guy was spot on the number. I couldn't believe it. He was spot on. That's what it costs us to grow our tobacco.
Wow.
And so, but we didn't do it for that reason. Remember, if you're a farmer growing tobacco, you've got to grow your tobacco for a certain price and sell it for a little more, right? So I'm going to stay in business. That's not what our model was. Our model was grow the best tobacco, regardless of the price, and make great cigars that are very unique. And I was confident we can sell them. We'll sell them through our stores. We sell, all kinds of unique, expensive products in our stores. If you grow tobacco in America, it's going to cost more money. There's no way around it. Unless we can invent a machine that can, harvest this tobacco in primings, which is impossible to do. You got to pay American wages, and American wages versus Nicaraguan wages are, one full day's worth of labor costs in Nicaragua. I'll get 1/2 hour worth of labor in America.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the difference. Okay. So it's a huge, huge difference. But at the end of the day, we weren't doing it for that. We're doing it so that you can have a cigar like this. Where's my camera there? An FSG, one of these, or there's 6 or 7 other cigars we got them in, and that would have a different component. And the only way to do that is there's no easy way. It's a hard road, and we did it. But it's something we knew that if sort of like when California started growing wine, growing grapes, the Italians were laughing at them, the French were laughing at them. Right?
Yeah.
But you know what? They stuck it out, and even in Oregon, you guys got some great wines out of there. Yep. And ice wine out of Canada, right? So
Yep.
if you put your mind to it, and people did it, it wasn't easy. There were guys that were pioneers that did it, but they made it happen.
All right, and we're going to have a giveaway in a couple minutes. We're actually going to tell you a little bit about the giveaway as soon as we get back from our first break. So here's a break from our first sponsor.
Brought to you by Gurkha Cigars. Gurkha Cigars, makers of the world's finest cigars. Try the 93 rated Heritage featuring Rosado, Ecuadorian Habano wrapper, Nicaraguan binder, and Dominican, Pennsylvanian, and Nicaraguan fillers. Blended by Gurkha's blending team at American Caribbean Cigars, it is hand-rolled Nicaraguan, available in 35-count boxes. Talk to your local B&M about the Heritage today, or talk to them about other fine Gurkha cigars. Whatever your taste preferences, Gurkha has a cigar that's right for you.
All right, and we're back. And as promised, we do have a giveaway. We have, I haven't seen exactly what they are, but we have 5 pieces of art from Subculture Studios that we'll be giving away at the end of the show. So if you ask a question in the comments down there while we're still live, and we ask your question, you're entered to win. So, I mean, it couldn't be easier than that. And then at the end of the show, I'll list out the winners, and we'll get you some sweet Subculture swag sent your way. So, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, so that's when I saw that stand-up humidor that Jesse did with the FSG branding and logo on it.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that, I was like, can I just, take it apart and kind of fit it in my carry-on luggage or something? And, maybe Nicaraguan officials wouldn't catch that. And it is an impressive piece.
I saw that, and Jesse had posted a picture on that when he was making it, and I don't even have one of those. Those things are so beautiful. But, But actually, seeing Jesse do his work at Subculture Studios for me is something special. Him doing the
yeah, it really is.
And for me, there's a personal thing behind it, because John and I became friends in, like, I don't know, it was 2000 or 99 when I was down in Nicaragua. And he was literally living above his factory where it was next to Nick Perdomo's. And I remember meeting Jesse. Jesse basically was John's interpreter.
Yeah.
First, John didn't speak Spanish, and Jesse was the bodyguard, because Jesse's like 3 feet taller than everybody else, and that's the leader. You know what I mean? So we used to spend a lot of time together, and it's just great to see, 15, 16 years later, or whatever, that Jesse's involved with it too. So anyway, that's my short story.
I have two things to say about that. First, whoever at Subculture came up with the FSG logo did a fantastic job, because I feel like you could slap this logo on anything and it looks great.
Well, we got to give Joey the props on that. Joey came up with some different renderings from. We have a tobacco logo that we use for the farm, and then we have the FSG brand. Let me explain the difference here. FSG, the tobacco itself, we like to consider that like the Intel inside a computer. FSG tobacco is a component that's used in cigars. A unique tobacco used in cigars. FSG, Florida Sungrown, the brand is made by Drew Estate, and that's the exclusive product from Drew Estate. So that's why it has that, this logo, which is the one for the cigar that's sold by Drew Estate now, and also now it's going to be available at all the retail stores across America, all the Drew Diplomat accounts. So basically, if they got Liga Privada, they'll be able to have FSG as well.
And the other note that I have to say specifically about Subculture is it's really amazing how Jesse has built a team of people who have the same artistic mind as he does. His whole team paints stuff, and it looks like something that he could have done himself. It's amazing. Yeah,
well, they a lot of those guys were tattoo guys. They had a tattoo studio for a little bit in Managua. So but it's good to see. He's got a big team now, but it was the one-man band at one time with just Jesse there, and it was fun to watch.
So maybe we can get into some audience questions, Trippy, because I'm sure there's some weasels on watching the show for sure.
We've got a bunch, and of course, Facebook is doing the Facebook, and it's hiding a bunch of the comments. So some of them are getting hidden. The first one I have is from Ruben Goodblood, and he just wants to know: were there any barriers with like the with the FDA specifically to you getting into growing tobacco? Were you worried about the FDA coming in and kind of stomping out your plans or anything like that?
Yeah, remember there was a political side to this?
Oh yeah.
Let me go into that. When again back to the thing about farms and things like that, and we started on this FDA battle back in 2000. I want to say 2009. That's when CRA started in 2008. 2009, we were able to have Congressman Bill Posey, Kathy Castor, and Bill Nelson and Marco Rubio introduced a bill in the Congress to basically the same bill we have today, to exempt the premium cigars from FDA regulation, because we knew there was a problem. There's no hiding it. I mean, once they came out and said they were going to regulate cigars, we knew we had an issue. So, but the thing is, in business, and this is just my business advice to anybody out there, you can't sit there on the sidelines and wait out. If this is my recommendation to the whole industry too, by the way, if you sit there and wait on the FDA, maybe they're going to regulate, maybe they won't, blah, blah, blah. We could have been sitting on the sidelines for 8 to 12 years. You know what I'm saying? You got to continue on your business, continue on your vision, continue on with your life. And I'm not saying ignore FDA, but it's not going to stop us from being innovators. It's not going to stop us from doing what we do. We're going to continue to grow FSG tobacco. We're going to grow the brands. We're going to operate Corona Cigar Company as if whatever rules we have to deal with, we'll deal with. But we're not going to be like a hermit crab and go inside a shell. So but the flip side of this is that there's a saying, you bet the farm, right? So in this case, the way the current regulations are written, yeah, we bet the farm on it. But I've always had, my gut instinct has never steered me wrong. And I always recommend people trust your gut. If your gut tells you something's wrong, it's wrong. If it tells you it's okay, it's usually okay. I still to this day believe there's no possible way that the current FDA regulations as written will be able to be even implemented on the cigar industry, let alone we got a lawsuit out there. We're working with the FDA and the OMB and working with members of Congress, because as written right now, if this thing gets enacted the way it is, half of the industry's out of business, right?
Yeah.
I just, as an American, I just don't believe that it's possible to let that happen, that people in Congress, Democrats or Republicans, are going to sit on the sideline saying, oh, that's okay. I just don't see that happening, because once the caca hits the fan, you've got people that are going to see, no, these guys weren't just crying wolf. They're not, they weren't saying the sky's falling. This is real. This FDA impact is real. So yes, it is a concern, and we constantly work on this. I mean, we spend a lot of time and money on this, battling the FDA, and it's unfortunate. For every dollar we spend in politics and battling this, that's dollars that could be used for productive things. Spending money in Washington is not a productive use of money. It's
for anybody.
Not. It's not. It's
not at all.
Think about how much money is wasted on campaigns when you talk about the billions of dollars spent on campaigns. But anyway, that's a whole nother show. But,
yeah.
But anyway, FDA, yes, it's a concern. We did get FSG cigars by Drew Estate out before the deadline, whenever that was last year. So everybody started, getting cigars in the market just to beat that deadline. Yeah. But even with that deadline, I still don't. Listen, this industry, you cannot name an industry out there where if you said no new products after this date, where would we be with anything? I mean, just look at, let me look. Mm-hmm. I've got Maker's Mark in front of me, right? This Maker's Mark, Maker's 40, this is a private select, by the way, that we do. This didn't exist, 3 years ago. Maker's Mark 46 didn't exist 4 years ago. So there's all these different things in every category, whether it's cars, computers, liquor. The only industry that benefits by having only one brand and never having new ones is Philip Morris and Marlboro.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's enough on that subject. we'll keep.
I have a bunch of questions about the farm, but I want to give our audience a chance to, because we're talking.
We do have some farm questions here.
Yeah.
All right.
So this one is from our buddy Don Bleeker, and he's noticed, and others have noticed too, of course, that there's a distinct citrus note in the FSG.
Absolutely.
And somebody speculated, he says, that they use discarded citrus as fertilizer. Can you comment on that?
I wish we could. I wish we did. But let me tell you, that's the other thing. We talk about agriculture. It's hard to make a living in agriculture. In Florida, the citrus farmers are going broke. We've got a big problem in this state with something called citrus greening, and it's wiping out the orange groves. Where our farm was at one time was an orange grove. The whole area of Claremont was an orange grove. We're in the city of Orlando, which resides in the county of Orange County. So, where John, the Corona cigar you've been out on Sand Lake Road?
Yeah.
This Dr. Phillips was a citrus grower.
Oh, no kidding.
Everything around here used to be oranges. Unfortunately, through freezes and everything else, most of the industry started moving a little bit further south. It doesn't matter. These guys are getting knocked out by something called greening. So there's no orange peels to be had around us anymore. If there were, we could compost it and use it as a fertilizer. But all the juice plants pretty much around Orange County and Central Florida, there's no more oranges to juice.
So all we're talking is straight tobacco and the topology, the soil composition and the weather of that area.
I do have a funny comment about that. What we do fertilize our tobacco with is there's a town north of here called Ocala, Florida. If anybody follows horse racing and thoroughbred horses, Ocala is the thoroughbred capital of Florida. Some of your Kentucky Derby winners, your finest thoroughbred horses are raised in Ocala, and we do get manure from the horse stables, and we apply it to the field, and I'm talking semi-truckloads. We bring it in January. We're prepping the field, and we do use some of the most prized horse manure on the planet, but I don't taste in that.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I feel like that's not where the citrus flavor is coming from, at least.
Yeah, I mean, because I kind of cheated a couple years ago when I was down at Drew Estate, and in the corner, we spotted the Polone of Florida Sungrown, and so at the time John was doing the host, and he said, "Yeah, go over, smell it, touch it, taste it, with it on the fire." And the first thing I noticed, the immediate thing I noticed when we combusted it, was this really strong citrus component. I said, that's got to be my brain playing tricks with Florida. But I'm like, I swear, I just immediately get citrus, and smoking it, absolutely immediately get a citrus component, and my brain and my palate cannot move past it. And that's one of the sort of defining qualities that I find in that tobacco.
Yeah, well, I can tell you this: 50 years for 50 years at least, where our fields of tobacco were, it was oranges at one time, but the fields that we have where the tobacco are, they had laid fallow for at least probably 10 to 15 years before we start growing tobaccos, because most of the orange growers, they get hit by a bad freeze. I don't know, that was 20 years ago, and guys tried to replant, and then they got hit by another freeze right after that. And said you can't farming. I'm telling you, farming, it's almost impossible to make money on it.
Yeah,
you replant your trees, and then they freeze the next year.
Yeah, you gotta love what you do if you're a farmer, because nobody's getting rich
on earth. Thank God. I'm telling you, everybody should thank the farmer every time you grab something to eat or drink.
Yeah.
But anyway,
think we can squeeze one more in, Trippy, before the next break?
All right. Let me find a good one here. Here's one from Arnold Seraphin, and it sounds like he's in the area. He wants to know if so actually I'm going to preface this by saying you've grown, in this Drew Estate cigars at least, there's been Criollo and Corojo, is that right?
Yeah, let me explain that one. So we got our seeds from, remember I told you a lot of guys helped us out. So Eduardo Fernandez was the guy that really helped me out right from the beginning. Eduardo and I are really good friends, and you call people fed heads. He's a farm head like me. The guy's in the cattle, he's in the tobacco, he's in the hogs. The guy's in everything. So anyway, so Eduardo and I are always talking farming, and he's like, listen, anything you need on this project, I'll help you out with. And he's got a team of Cubans that work with him, and he's got some of the best. Arsenio Ramos and Jacinto. These guys are the best guys from Cuba that work for him in Nicaragua. And so Eduardo gave me his authentic Corojo 99 and the Criollo 98. And he gets the straight up seeds right out of Cuba there. And both tobaccos, it's a funny story. We were going to plant in 2013 when we started. I planted one half of the field with Corojo and one half with Criollo to do an analysis, which one's going to grow better, right?
Yeah.
Well, they both grew fantastic, and you really couldn't tell the difference between the leaves. Corojo's got a little more of a barrel shape to it. Criollo's got a little wider barrel shape to it. Corojo's a little smaller. But let me tell you, the first year when we were growing tobacco, man, we got smacked because I didn't realize how fast this tobacco was going to grow between harvests. So we just had to put it all in the barn because it was ready to go quicker than we can harvest it. So the very first crop had Corojo and Criollo, and that is what's in that limited edition box press one. Now, every year after that, we've only grown Corojo, and there's a reason. The farm's small. We only grow 5,000 pounds of tobacco a year. I like the flavor of Corojo. I've always been a fan of Corojo, and that's why if both plants performed equally, I chose Corojo.
All right, and we're going to take our second station break here, and then we'll be back with more questions from us and a lot more audience questions.
This show is sponsored by Cigar Oasis. Don't spend all your time worrying about your cigar wrappers cracking, splitting, or falling apart from humidity fluctuation issues. Set it and forget it by choosing Cigar Oasis, a professional solution which provides equal distribution of humidity with precise electronic controls. Monitor your cigars through the internet using the Smart Humidor Wi-Fi attachment. Why don't you spend all your time enjoying your cigars and relaxing, and let Cigar Oasis protect your cigars? Cigar Oasis has solutions for any humidor. Make sure you set it and forget it today.
All right, and we're back. Surgeon, your timing was just a little bit off there. I think maybe I hit the button before you were.
Or the clock is just frozen up here. Who knows?
Possibly.
Y'all caught me taking a drink there. You see that?
So I have a question. I'm gonna sneak in a host question here, because Trippy and I had an opportunity to go up to Connecticut recently, and I've been to quite a number of farms, both in Cuba and Nicaragua, and I made the mistake of thinking, well, farming's farming and harvesting.
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you, that was an eye-opener going to Connecticut, because, as you say, Jeff, the labor processes in the United States are like, you can't just throw labor at it, because labor is where all your money's going. You can't just throw bodies at it. And so we saw a number of things that they were doing, processes to optimize labor and optimize production that just simply isn't being done anywhere else in the world. So can you talk a little bit about sort of some of the things that are being done on the Florida Sungrown farm that simply aren't being done in, say, places like Nicaragua and Cuba, because they can just throw bodies at it?
Several things that just right off from the way we make our rows. Florida is the second largest vegetable producer after California. So if anybody goes through I-4 to Tampa, you'll see a town called Plant City where they grow a lot of strawberries, and you'll see where the rows have a what's called a plastic mulch. It can be either white or black film that's used. That's a barrier to help keep the weeds down, and also it helps retain the moisture, so we don't have to use as much water. We use drip irrigation. If you're in Nicaragua, the guy has a big hose and he just kind of runs it down each of the row. We don't do that. That number one, that's very labor intensive. Number two, there's no way you can water a whole field when you need it by trying to do it with a hose. So we do it with drip irrigation, and also we use something called fertigation, where we use liquid fertilizer that goes into the drip irrigation, which makes that fertilizer go right on the plant instead of just broadcasting it where half of it washes off and goes into the lakes and stuff like that. We want to put our tobacco or our fertilizer into where our plants are. So in our planting mechanism, we plant the same way they do in Connecticut, though, where somebody rides on the back of the tractor. I don't know if you've ever seen them plant. It punches a hole, and then you set your tobacco plant in that way. We use that, whereas in Nicaragua they'll just do it by hand with a stick, because labor's cheap there, and also there's a lot of people. So there's one thing I talked to George Padron about that one time, and he was saying one of the things why they don't mechanize in Nicaragua is, besides the cost, but the last thing you want to do is have people where they don't have any work to do.
Yeah.
Because there's plenty of people to do those jobs. But in the United States, it's a little different. We've got to try and, again, our costs are so high. So we use a planting machine that goes behind the tractor. And then also, I don't know if when you're in Connecticut, there's a machine that we use to sow, which is much faster than sewing it by hand.
Oh, yeah.
Which absolutely blew us away.
Yeah, those machines, but you got to learn how to do it. And the other thing is, I bought our machines from Connecticut because the Connecticut shade growers are growing out of business there because they can't compete with Ecuador.
Yeah.
And so almost all the guys are out of business on that.
Oh.
But so there's a ton of machines up there. So a few years ago, Larry Palumbo from Altadis helped me out. We were looking at the Altadis farms and their shade growing operations, and then one of the guys they buy broadleaf from used to grow shade. So I bought 5 of his machines. These machines are from 1950, though. They're very old.
Yep.
But I used to be a mechanic a long time ago. So I have a mechanical background. And thank God I have that, because that's the other thing you can't have. If you're a farmer, you better know
how to fix things. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's like you being up there in Canada. If you go in the middle of nowhere, man, you need to fix your own stuff. You're not just going to call up and say, "Hey, fix my tobacco sewing machine."
Yeah.
You got to. And so that was part of a challenge. But we did figure it out, and we use those machines that they use up in Connecticut. And not only are they're a little quicker, but the way it's a Swiss guy that invented it, and it makes the tobacco placed on the string in a perfect spot. Because if you have somebody stringing tobacco and they put them too close together or too far apart, if they're too close together, there's not enough airflow, and sometimes you'll get them, the stem can rot on you.
Yep.
If they're too far apart, your barn that should have held 5,000 pounds of tobacco or whatever the number is for someone else, but like for us, we need to at least get 5,000 pounds of tobacco in there. If it doesn't, if they space it out too far, your barn will be full, and yet you never got all the leaves in. You know what I'm saying? Because you put them out.
Yeah, you have 200 pounds of tobacco that you got nothing to do with.
Yeah, so that's why the machine is good too, because it makes them perfectly spaced on the string. So those are some of the and the other thing we do too that's different. We have a big sprayer that we use on the back of a tractor, whereas in Nicaragua they'll do it with a backpack sprayer.
Mm-hmm.
It's cheaper just to send 10 guys down the rows with backpack sprayers in Nicaragua, but we have one mounted on a tractor because it's not cheaper to send 10. And but the flip side to that, if you look at our field, we have what's called tractor rows. So every 6 rows of tobacco, there's going to be a 5-foot space where the tractor has to be able to fit through it.
Mm-hmm.
So we actually have way less yield per acre than what you would do as if you were in a foreign country, because you don't have to lose that space for the tractor. So everything's a trade-off.
So I gotta finish Arnold's question because I forgot to ask his part of the question. I asked my part. Do you have any plans on experimenting with Connecticut shade down there?
No, and that's an interesting thing. Florida was the second largest grower of shade tobacco, and so we know it can be done. Matter of fact, I'll be up in Havana, Florida, which is in Gadsden County, which was that was the epicenter of Florida tobacco. Quincy and Gadsden County, Quincy and Havana. But the reason why I won't grow shade, there's 2 reasons. Number one, it adds even more to the cost because now we got to put up poles, wires, and the cheesecloth. And secondly, as a retailer, this is the difference. When you're a retailer, you know what's going on in the industry. When you're a farmer, I hate to say this, but the cigar industry intentionally kept American farmers totally clueless about what goes on in the cigar industry. They have no idea. And so what has happened, though, is that you have cigars out there that are called Connecticut shade, that there's nothing Connecticut in it. It's from Ecuador, right?
Yeah.
Ecuador tobacco is half the price of Connecticut because everything's cheaper there, right?
Yeah.
So the Connecticut farmers kept losing market share. And the other thing, as a retailer, the consumers they didn't know the difference. If I handed you a cigar that had Connecticut shade on it or Ecuador shade, you wouldn't be able to tell. I can tell, but most consumers can't. So you would see, matter of fact, Ecuador's a little cleaner looking, by the way.
Yeah, they're a little prettier.
Yeah, they're a little prettier. However, Connecticut, in my opinion, has a more nutty flavor to it, and I prefer the taste of Connecticut over Ecuador. Nothing wrong with Ecuador, but there is a slight flavor difference. But knowing that, there's no reason for us to grow it because if we have a Florida shade tobacco and you can't tell the difference between Ecuador shade, what's the point of doing it?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So the most important thing we did when we grew our Florida tobacco, which you guys talked about right when you started the show, you tasted our tobacco and it tasted different. Yeah. That was the most important thing. If our tobacco tasted just like Cuban tobacco or just like Nicaraguan tobacco, there's no point in doing it because you can't taste the difference. It had to be a leaf that when you blended it in a cigar, that it tasted different. Now, I got lucky. Not only did it taste different, it smells completely different. When someone lights up a cigar with FSG in it, I can smell it from a mile away. And the reason I can smell it from a mile away is because it smells just like the tobacco barn when we're curing the tobacco. It's got an incredible aroma that's totally unique to it. So, that was something we just got lucky on. But that's what we needed. We needed something that made a difference when you put it in a cigar. And the second thing that was really good about that is that when you blend it, remember, I work with cigar makers, right? We don't have a cigar factory, but we work with Willie Herrera, Drew Estate, Eduardo Fernandez, Davidoff, all those guys. So when we give them the tobacco to work with, when they put it in a blend and you put it in with Nicaraguan and Brazil and everything else, it can't get covered up. The good part is it stands through.
Really.
Through. Yeah.
I've tried all of those different blends that have the FSG, and all of them stand apart from the other similar blends that don't have the FSG, which is exactly what you want, right?
And that was key because as a consumer, why would you pay for the FSG if you can't taste it.
Absolutely.
So that's why it, again, some divine intervention there. Everything worked on that end. So, we say prayers at night and thank God that those things worked out.
And we've got another viewer question here from Bob the Cigar Guy. He wants to know if the hurricane impacted the farms at all.
That's a great question, man. We were sweating bullets the week before.
I didn't even think about that.
Sure.
Yeah, it was. I've lived in Florida since 1974. That hurricane that was coming through, when you say it's Category 5, one of the bad parts about hurricanes in Florida is that the news makes you think you're going to die no matter what hurricane comes through.
Yeah.
75-mile-an-hour winds on a Category 1, or when you get to Central Florida, it's not that big of a deal. We have afternoon thunderstorms that are that strong. When you start talking about a Category 5, let me put this in perspective. If you're driving your car 75 miles an hour down the road, and then you're driving at 100, it's a very noticeable difference, right? Now imagine driving 175 miles an hour. That's the speed that NASCAR cars are going around a racetrack. Yeah. Those things are flying by a lot faster than if you're watching somebody go down the highway. That's how strong the storm was. So this was a. I was nervous as long as everybody else in Florida was, and unfortunately that storm changed track and went right over our farm. Now the days leading up to the storm, when it looked like this thing was going to hit us, we had an entire crop of tobacco in the barns. Tobacco barns are the trusses and the walls are hurricane rated, but the metal is sheet metal held on by sheet metal screws. That's not meant to withstand 100-mile-an-hour plus winds. So I was very concerned about the roof ripping off because that's usually what happens. So we rented 2 big U-Haul trucks and literally packed that tobacco in the cartons and put them inside the trucks because the truck's not going to blow away.
Wow.
And so we
wow, I didn't know you were still processing tobacco at that point.
All our tobacco is cured, but it wasn't all 100% packed up, and it hasn't been exported yet either. So remember, one thing about being the only cigar tobacco grower in the state, you can't insure your crop. Insurance only works when you have a pool of people to spread the risk to.
Right.
So we're into this. If the roof blows off and gets soaked with 13 inches of rain, which is what we got out there, it's ruined, right? So we had rented 2 trucks. We loaded those trucks up. We finished on Saturday. The storm came on Sunday. The trucks were watertight, worked out great. And believe it or not, the barns didn't sustain any damage. We had trees down. Power was out. The neighbor's house had shingles flying off of it. We were picking shingles up out of the tobacco field. But the barns stayed put. And not a single screw pulled out. So, again, thank God, man, we got lucky. And
that's lucky.
Yeah, so it was a lot of work. I mean, we spent. I was at the, working on the ranch today. We have a cattle ranch too, and there's trees everywhere. So there's a ton of cleanup we got to do. But at the end of the day, we got lucky. No one's got injured during the storm here in Central Florida. There's trees down everywhere. And my hat's off to the linemen. If there's any linemen out there listening to this, man, God bless you. You guys are the best. Florida Power and Seco and all these other guys, these guys were working 7 days a week, nonstop. And that's the biggest thing when you go through a big hurricane is getting power back. And these guys really, they really busted hump and got it. And matter of fact, somebody told me there was a crew from Canada that got their power on. So, I mean, that's hats off to the Canadian Power linemen that drove all the way down to help out. So,
wow.
I don't think we had anybody make it from Oregon. But anyway, that we did okay. It was a lot of extra work, but we're thank you for asking. We did good.
And good. Jeff, the 3 stores in Orlando and the store in Tampa, how'd they fare through the hurricane?
Tampa did great. That was the one where the storm was supposed to go over. This Sand Lake store we're in, it was a mess. I got to tell you. No. But inside was great. The staff here, Corona Cigar's got incredible staff. We get the best guys on the planet, and they really. Everything, when a storm like this comes through, every single thing has to come off the floor.
Yeah.
It is, because there's water going to get in your store. The windows will leak and all that other stuff. Parking lot was flooded, and the outside of the store got pretty trashed, where rooftop flying off and things like that. But anyway, listen, we could clean all that up, which is what we did.
Yeah.
And that's just part of living in Florida. It's like if you're in Canada, there's a snowstorm, you got to shovel your way out of it, right?
It's true.
Eventually, you're going to dig your way out of it. And so that's what people in Florida have been doing. They've been cleaning up and cutting trees and getting everything. There's still debris everywhere. If you drive down the road right now, there's tree debris everywhere. But that's it'll take a month or 2 to get it cleaned up, but we'll get out of it.
And we have to take our last station break, which is, as people who watch the show frequently know, our ad's a little out of date, but it's brought to us by Drew Estate. They good.
Download the Drew Diplomat app, get on that Drew Diplomat program, check in those FSGs. I mean, there's always subculture stuff on the hopper. If you don't have those Drew Diplomat points from checking in, I mean, you can go to any of the Corona locations and you can check in and you can get points. Smoke that FSG checking into the shop, or show up at a Drew Estate event at one of the Corona locations and get some extra points. And there's always, I think there's always extra stuff going on. If you go down when there's a Drew Estate event and you're a Drew Diplomat member, there's some extra stuff there. So don't don't miss
show
out.
them that you're on the you're on the app. They'll give you an extra free cigar. That's an exclusive cigar. The only way you get it is by going to an event and showing your Drew Diplomat app.
Boom.
We've got so many questions now. They're rolling in. People want to win this stuff.
They want to win that stuff.
So Chico Ray has a question about something that I just learned about like maybe 10 minutes before we got ready for this show, which is the American, a cigar with an FSG wrapper. When is that coming out?
Hopefully soon. That's an interesting project that JC Newman's doing. Remember we talked about having things made in America, right?
Yeah, I was going to ask what factory that was coming out of. So it's coming out of JC Newman in Ybor City? Yeah,
that's coming out of the JC Newman factory, hand-making cigars in that factory again. And it's made with all American tobacco. It uses wrapper from our farm. So we got Florida Sungrown wrapper on it, and then it has Pennsylvania broadleaf and Connecticut broadleaf, and then Connecticut Havana in the blend. And the Pennsylvania tobacco.
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, so soon. Again, I grow the tobacco on it, and I help out as much as I can. But the actual making of that cigar is that's a project by Drew Newman, and we're going to let him hit that when it comes out.
That's a fair answer.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, Jeff, are you on the farm? Are you focused mostly on, because, you know, I know with the labor costs, one of the things I said in Connecticut is they're really focused on wrapper tobacco, because that's where the money is. Is that the focus of your farm, or is that a sort of a secondary consideration, just making quality tobacco?
Well, one of the first things I learned from Eduardo Fernandez was, he said, Jeff, whenever you grow your tobacco, always try and grow wrapper, because no matter what, when you grow wrapper, you're going to get filler. If you only try to grow filler, you'll never get wrapper.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, because, you know, it costs us as much money to pick a leaf that has a hole in it or one that's perfect, right?
Yep.
So if we have tobacco that's got a hole on either side, we don't even pick it. We just tell our workers to just snap it off and throw it on the ground, because remember, the labors would cost us the money.
Yep.
So this year we have an incredible crop. Best crop ever was this year. And so we're going to have a lot of wrapper from this year's crop. Last year, we had a great tobacco crop, but we had terrible weather. We had a hailstorm that hit us late. We always get hail. It always happens. But if you get hail and your plant is only this tall, it's not a problem, because those leaves are not going to be the ones that turn into cigar, you know, the ones we use later as the plant gets bigger. If you get a hailstorm and your plant is, 3 feet tall, 4 feet tall, every single leaf on that plant are the ones that you would have harvested. And we had a hailstorm in last year when the tobacco was about 4 feet tall. So we had a lot of damaged leaves. So, at the end we had 3,500 pounds of tobacco. Now, normally we grow 5,000. But last year with a hailstorm, we don't, if it's got holes in it now, there's no point in picking it. But this year we had 7,000 pounds. So, there's good years and bad years. And I there's sort of a coconut telegraph that we use between people that grow tobacco. And, Hirochi Robanya down in Cuba was telling me he finds that it's always been a cycle for him. He goes, every 3 years, you're going to have a phenomenal crop. You're going to have one that's fantastic, one that's okay, and then you're going to have one where the weather's going to just nail you. And that's just the way it is. And you know what? The folks in Connecticut got nailed with hail this year. They had a
Yeah, I was going to mention that at the Barn Smoker, the farm that the Barn Smoker was held at in Connecticut, they had such a bad hailstorm that affected that particular farm so bad, it was cheaper to just mulch all the tobacco than to harvest any of it.
Well, the other thing is they have crop insurance up there. So with
okay.
It'll cover their costs. But here, if we get hit by hail, we're eating it. So for them, they can at least with crop insurance, they won't make any money though. But at least it'll cover like their costs of what they had into it to get it to that point.
Right.
So but yeah, it happens. It happens like I said, that's why big cigar factories have an advantage where they spend, you go to Fuente or go to Davidoff or Altadis and all these other guys, they have tons of tobacco. I mean, they have Drew Estate. Drew Estate has tobacco, you got to
years. Yeah.
You're going to have years where it's just not, things happen, right? Yeah. And so you can't be in that position where if you have a year of bad, where there's no broadleaf available, right? You want to be able to still make Liga Privadas. So you got to make sure you got more, that you should have at least a 3-year supply of tobacco in stock. That costs a ton of money. That's why cigars are expensive, man. Seriously. So that's, it's a handmade product using a product that's at the mercy of Mother Nature. So it's one of the things we deal with.
Trippy and I have said on multiple occasions, if only we could take that guy that complains about the cost of a cigar and take him out to the farm for a day and bring him back, he'll never complain about the cost of a cigar again.
It's so true. I'm amazed. If you go through the whole process, because, if you see it from the time we plant the seed to the time we actually put it on the shelf in the store, you would think that cigars would cost $100 a piece.
Yeah.
Work goes into it. And you know what? Honestly, if they weren't made in Nicaragua and Dominican Republic, they would be a lot more because it's just the amount of labor. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Here's a question from Cole Cruz. He wants to know, as a retailer, when and why did you decide to start a farm?
Well, we wanted to do something different. Again, from the political aspect of it, and also to have have cigars that had a unique component. For example, when we're selling Liga Privadas and T52s and Davidoff, Oro Blancos, and all this other stuff, you got all these. There's a market for people that want something different, and we knew that we could make a cigar that had. The other thing about being in the cigar business for 20 years, I've heard every bullshit story. The cigar different. Oh, we only use the finest tobacco. Tell me a cigar maker that doesn't say he doesn't use the finest tobacco.
Grade A tobacco. Oh, you're the first one to use grade A tobacco.
Shit tobacco for mine, right? Now, every cigar maker's get this, the same old line, right? But then there's the legit. You look at legit operations, and you see, you go to Drew Estate Cigar Safari, you see what's involved here, right? You see they're really making. The way they're doing things and these factories that have, again, we talked about millions of dollars of tobacco in stock and actually making cigars. So we had to come up with something that was truly unique. And this was a passion project. Again, this wasn't about, as crazy as it sounded, this was not about making money. It was about not losing money, though. That's the thing, because there's no way you can have a farm. And it's just got to be sustainable. It's just got to cover the costs, because if we're losing money year over year, pretty soon everybody gets tired of losing money. Yeah. So we needed to make sure that we could get products out that can at least make the farm sustainable. You hear that word a lot in agriculture, by the way, sustainable. Because if you don't, that's why you see farms closing up or just not growing anything anymore, because they can't make ends meet. So that's why we did it. We wanted something unique. We wanted something special. And we wanted something from Florida again. I mean, look, none of us have smoked a cigar with Florida tobacco before. Your grandfather might have, but none of us have, right?
No.
So why isn't that something that it's like, man, I would like to have a cigar that has Florida tobacco in it. And knowing that it was done before, I say this on the Barn Smoker all the time. The tobacco that's in our field has no idea whether it's 2017 or 1817. It has no concept of time. And we already know that great cigar tobacco was grown here. The Cubans had a huge plantation, by the way. Most people don't talk about it. If you Google Fort Meade, Fort Meade, M-E-A-D, Fort Meade, Florida, and tobacco, The Cubans had a 350-acre cigar tobacco plantation in 1895 to 1904 during the Spanish-American War. That's a huge farm. Let me tell you, 350 acres of tobacco is big, especially when you're using mules and hoes. Seriously. So what happened during the Spanish-American War? That they didn't know. They didn't know what was going to happen in their country. They had Spain fighting against. They wanted their independence, all this other stuff. These guys left there and came to Florida to start growing Cuban tobacco here. So, and they were growing Sungrown too, by the way. And it was very successful. But once the war ended and they were told that they could go back and own land and have a farm, they went back to their country. Little did they know, in 1961, you'd have, or 1959 actually, you'd have Fidel Castro taking all their shit from them. But anyway, that's what happened. But the Cuban tobacco was grown here 100 years ago, 125 years ago, and it was great tobacco then. Why can't it be great tobacco today? So that's part of the reason we did it.
Nice.
All right, let's squeeze in one more question before we have to end the Armed Forces Radio Network segment. 302JH, aka Man Angel number 1. He wants to know what are the challenges of exporting your crops from Florida to Nicaragua?
Ooh,
I hadn't even thought about that.
Good question.
That's a great question, man.
Yeah, I love that question.
Boy, we had to fumble our way through that one. That was challenging at first, because first off, when you act, there's two things that have to be done. When you, and I didn't know this before, there's something called a phytosanitary certificate. I didn't know what those words meant. But what it is, basically, the U.S. Department of Agriculture comes by whenever you're exporting agriculture product. They're going to make sure, number one, what you say is in the cartons is what's in there. So it's not like we export drugs out of the United States, but sometimes drugs come back into our country, right? So if you say that there's, you're exporting, cigar tobacco, they actually come and look. They look in the boxes. And they also make sure that that's what's in it, just to make sure there's not there's issues with exotic plants and animals coming across countries, right? And all of a sudden you got monkeys living here that came from, we're not supposed to have monkeys in Orlando, right? But anyway, that's why they inspect, things like livestock and plants. So the funny part is when we called the U.S. Department of Agriculture, nobody knew how to do it, because they're stationed in Florida. They're like, man, I don't know how to do this. Nobody's ever exported tobacco.
No experience, yeah.
No clue. So it took about literally 2 months. You're dealing with bureaucrats too. But listen, I love the people at the Department of Agriculture. They're much different than the people at IRS. These people actually are there to help you. But so it took about 2 months for them to figure out how do you do this, right? So we got the phytosanitary certificate, and then the other thing was finding somebody to fumigate tobacco, or just fumigate the product, period. Because every agricultural product that comes into America and goes out gets fumigated. And they do that, so you don't have banana spiders from Costa Rica crawling around Florida and stuff like that, right? So they do that. So they fumigate all of everything you eat that comes from another country gets fumigated. But it gets fumigated with something that has no residual on it.
Yeah.
It's called methyl bromide.
Yeah.
Methyl bromide is about impossible to buy anymore unless it's used for agricultural purposes. There's only 2 companies in the entire state of Florida that do it. So I had to find these guys, and that was like an Easter egg hunt. So anyway, and then getting the paperwork done. So the first year that we did this, man, it was frustrating. And I'll thank my sister, Amy, who handles that for me now, because it's so frustrating. Because the other thing that happens when you're dealing with the government is that, remember, we only grow 1 crop a year. So the person that came inspected that last year may not work for the U.S. Department of Agriculture this year. And so then you got to go through the whole circus act again of how do you do this and that, and the certificate of origin. That's the other thing. There's 3 documents, and the certificate of origin is another one. So anyway, yeah, we get it done, and it's always again, thank you, Amy, for handling that, because I like doing work. I hate doing that kind of paperwork. It's frustrating when you got to make 50 phone calls to get one thing done.
Yeah, that's a great question. We should mark that one down.
Yeah, that one's getting some.
Send them some swag there.
So that brings us to the end of our Armed Forces Radio Network segment. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We appreciate you out there doing things that we're not built to do over here. Try to, have a great weekend. Enjoy a cigar if you can. Thank you for listening. All right, and now we're back in our what we call our After Dark segment, where we can say whatever we want.
So we're still live.
We're still live on Facebook.
Still going to be on podcast. So we can't say anything that would get us in trouble.
We won't.
Exactly. but I mean, we've just got a bunch more questions here.
All right, let's go.
Let me find this one from Kevin. I'm marking down the names so that I can find them because we've got a lot of chatter as well. So Kevin wanted to know, I can't even find the way he phrased it, but he basically wants to know what's the difference in the Vitolas for the FSG Drew Estate line?
Well, the blend is the same on all of them, but I can tell you there's a taste difference between the 660 has in the Robusto. To me, I pick up the most FSG influence in the Robusto, and that probably has to do with when you bunch a Robusto, because it's a 5-inch cigar. When the roller breaks that leaf off at the bottom and flips everything around and puts it back in towards the top, I think you just get more of a double dose of it. So
yeah, you get less of that gap in the kind of the second, third.
Yeah, so I taste the FSG influence in the Robusto the most, and that's my favorite size. And the 6x60 as well. And again, Willie Herrera blended these cigars. Again, the guys at Drew Estate make it in their factory in Esteli. And I think the 660, just based on the ring size too, more than likely has an extra leaf in it of FSG as well, because it's got those two sizes have a different taste, whereas the Bellicoso and the Toro 6x52 to me taste identical, just the different shapes. And then the box press one tastes totally different because that uses a broadleaf wrapper.
That one is so good.
So that's totally different. It's a little stronger in my opinion. And then whereas the other round ones, the FSG and the round, are using Brazilian wrapper on it, so they've got a different flavor.
All right, John, you're up.
So obviously, it is a big project, it is a big undertaking. You already mentioned that there's a number of people in the industry that were more than happy to help out and lend some advice, lend assistance where they could. Did you find that kind of across the industry, where a lot of people sort of as excited about bringing tobacco back to Florida as you were?
The farmers are. I think a lot of cigar makers, in my opinion, that's sort of a good old boys club, and they like to keep those gates shut. But as far as the guys that grow tobacco, the Nestor Plasencias, the Hirochi Robañas, the Eduardo Fernandez, and I'll tell you why. Because when you grow cigar tobacco, you're the guy that really does the work. You understand what it means to be out there busting your tail, and it's hard work. So no matter any cigar tobacco grower, there's a mutual respect. And you can't fake it. You know what I mean? It's not like we're faking a farm. We're not faking what we're doing here. And so that's been good. And everybody's always been helpful on it too. And I'll add, Del Fernandez as well. He's a guy that does things, and Pepin Garcia. There's just Carlos Fuente Jr. Guys that actually make cigars and grow tobacco. There's 100% respect on that end because they're like, dude, look at this crazy retailer decided to grow cigar tobacco, man. Dude, you really, you know what I mean?
Crazy gringo.
And he's done it for 5 years, and they know the work that goes in. They know that there's no way we're making money on the tobacco. They know what it costs, and but we're doing it for the reason of like we said earlier, of having something special. So, and one of the coolest things that we all try to help each other. If there's problems, whatever, occasionally I actually get to give a little advice too, Max, because they see us doing some modern stuff. So that's kind of cool. Nick Perdomo's another guy that grows tobacco that helps. But one of the things about Nestor Plasencia came out to the farm, and his father, he's second generation grower. His father grows. Him and Eduardo Fernandez are the biggest tobacco growers in Central America. And one of the things that Nestor said was real interesting is that, yes, we try to help each other. But if you take technical advice from Central America and try to apply it to Orlando, Florida, or Claremont, Florida, it doesn't always work. Yeah. Same thing with Connecticut, and same thing with the Dominican Republic. The area that so far, anything that works in Cuba works for us.
Interesting.
Florida is very close to Cuba. We have very similar climates. And the big difference is the altitude. We're at 105 feet above sea level, where our farm. That's the exact altitude of Pinar del Rio. If you Google it, you can see the altitude. If you look at the altitude in Esteli, it's 1,200, 1,100, 1,200 feet, 1,400 up in Jalapa. Things are very different when you start getting into higher altitude, especially when it comes to curing tobacco. Humidity and moisture and curing it, there's a whole different thing. But back to what Nestor said, he goes, tell me about it. He goes, I've brought people from Cuba and I've tried to do exactly what they do in Cuba, in Nicaragua and Honduras. And he goes, I have ruined entire crops by doing it the way they do it in Cuba. No disrespect to the Cubans that tried to, they're there to help on that. But it's just, Cuba and Nicaragua are not the same. They're not the same places. So it's just like where you're up in Canada, you're freezing over there. It's 90 degrees here.
Yeah.
Up there it's 30 degrees today. So it's a big difference in where you're growing it. So, but again, there's a camaraderie. There's definitely tons of respect for anybody that's growing tobacco.
And I guess obviously the added challenge beyond the heat, which, you see a lot of heat in Connecticut, but Florida especially, tons of heat. But Florida, especially humidity levels in Florida can be like right off the charts. So that's got to be a really interesting challenge in the curing barns to make sure that you're not getting tobacco rot.
That was interesting because we tried, when we built our first tobacco barn, which is now the barn where we keep our tractors, or put ventilation doors and all that kind of stuff like they have in Nicaragua and Connecticut.
Yep.
That was a huge waste of money. I never had to open them once. We had to do the exact opposite. Believe it or not, we have to add humidity to our...
Really?
And it goes back to the thing, you can look at how they do it in every other country, but actually, when we cure our tobacco, we're harvesting in May and June, right? And it's hanging in July. Yes, it gets humid in Florida, but it's 90% humidity in the morning. That's why you have dew around, right? By noontime, the humidity will be 55%. It's like clockwork. As soon as it rains at 3 or 4 o'clock, the humidity will go back up. We actually have to add humidity during the day. Otherwise, the barn will get too dry. But being a retailer that has humidified cigar stores, I knew a thing or two about humidifying, right? Yeah. So built my own humidification system for the barns. So we have to actually humidify our barns when we're curing our tobacco. That was something I never thought we would have to do. No one else has to do it but us.
Yeah, I was going to say nobody else does that.
Nobody else does that.
Yeah. Well, when you're in Connecticut and you're harvesting tobacco, it's hanging in October. So you've got tobacco that's in the barns in October. And if you're bringing stuff in September too, it's at night it's cool, and you got to get rid of that moisture. So they run heaters in there. They those stoves, right? So they have to fire them up to get rid of the moisture. So for us, it's the opposite. The only time we do it is a challenge though. When a tropical storm or hurricane comes through and you have rain for 2, 3, 4 days, then we have to make sure that we get the moisture out. And then we open all the doors and ventilate. But other than that, most times we're actually putting moisture in the barn.
Wow. That's really interesting, Jeff. I mean, it just really speaks to, like you said, you can take practices from other places, but they don't necessarily apply. And you found a unique challenge because, we've never heard of that. That's
and the other part I mentioned about it being hot, that was something too that I learned too. So Hirochi Robina, who's one of the premier growers of tobacco in Cuba, so he's been up to the farm a couple times. I really respect Hirochi, by the way. That guy's the real deal.
Super nice guy.
And when he's at the farm, I love it because he just starts working.
He's in his element.
He can't stop. I mean, we're walking through the field and he's like topping and suckering and all this stuff. The guy's like, you can tell he loves it, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things we talked about is, I said, in my barn, it's when we're hanging the tobacco, you can smell it like putting off the ammonia, like it's fermenting, right? Which is not normal when you're hanging tobacco. When it's in a barn, it's cured. When you put it in the piles to do the fermentation, that's when the nitrates are expelled in the form of ammonia. And so we actually start to smell that in the barn. I'm like, why is that happening? And when Nestor Plasencia came over to us, I said, why is that happening? He goes, I've only seen that happen in Cuba because when it gets real hot, which our tobacco's hanging in June and July, and let me tell you, it's smoking hot in Florida.
Yeah, I bet.
So that tobacco actually goes through a sweat while it's hanging up. So that sun in the heat actually helps us. Combined with the moisture, it actually starts to sweat just while it's up on the sticks inside the barn. Another thing that just we didn't know about, but it worked out in our favor.
That's fascinating. I mean, now that you've talked about the processes, I think Trippy and I definitely need to be going down to the Barn Smoker in Florida.
We'd love to have you.
That'd be fantastic.
Yeah,
Trippy.
I'm going to try to make it down to that one. We'll see. We've got a couple more questions here. Arnold Seraphin wants to know if you think that there's any way that local cigar makers in Tampa, if any of those factories that are kind of, they don't really sell their cigars outside of the factory, if they'll be able to buy some of your wrapper.
Probably not, and the only reason being is that we've had a core group of people that we're dealing with that have, it's easy to jump on the bandwagon once you see it works, right? But Jonathan and Marvin, when he was with Drew Estate, from the first time they saw the factory, they were believers in what we do. J.C. Newman, Eric and Bobby Newman, and Drew Newman especially, believers in the concept. Remember, they're the only factory in America. And we sent, and Davidoff has tobacco too, and then Eduardo Fernandez. Other than those four, we're probably not going to have our tobacco at any other factories, just because it's a partnership, right? They committed to supporting FSG in taking the risk. Be honest with you, taking the risk from day one with that leaf and making and the cigars turned out great. Now that we know that they're great, there's a lot of other people that want the leaf, but it's just not fair to loyalty for me is very important, and of course, those are the factories that we're going to stick with.
Well, and I guess with 5,000 to 7,000 pounds, I mean, especially for the larger manufacturers, that's such a small quantity of tobacco. It's probably easy for all that to get snapped up. Fortunately, you've got those great relationships that they'll take all that tobacco.
Yeah. So we're thankful for that. I love those little factories in Tampa, by the way. They're all basically in Ybor City. In Ybor City, if you ever have a chance to go to Tampa, we have a Davidoff store in Tampa, which is beautiful. That's the total opposite of Ybor City, meaning Ybor City's old. No, it's
yeah.
Way. But I'm saying it's got that old historic thing to it.
Yeah.
Or our Davidoff store is the modern, slick European, sophisticated look. So, but I love that in Ybor City, there's like 5 or 6 little cigar makers, and to me, it is so important that those guys not only survive but thrive, because Tampa's called the Cigar City for a reason, and it needs to have that element, that spirit of the entrepreneur that has the 2 or 3 rollers in his little shop on Ybor City down the street. That's what gives that street, that area, its character. So I love those shops, and I think they're great. But at the same time, J.C. Newman's right across the way there in Ybor City as well. And that's where our tobacco will be.
So, Trippy, you can look up an audience question, but I have a follow-up, which is not Florida Sungrown related. So you've done really successfully, obviously, with the Corona cigar lounges and bars. You've got the Monte Cristo Lounge. You've got the Drew Lounge. You've, of course, got the massive, because I think the Davidoff cigar bar in Tampa is like, 5,000 square feet or something massive?
Yeah, it's a little more than that. All our stores are really big, except
they're big.
Our Heathrow stores is a little smaller than the other ones, but smaller to us is huge to what most cigar stores are.
Yeah.
But there's a reason for them being big. I mean, it's believe it or not, it's as much work to run a small shop as it is a big one.
I believe it.
But not every town or not every neighborhood can support, a big Corona cigar, because they're the machine. They're very expensive to operate. They eat cash left and right, and you got to have a lot of customers, a lot of business to keep them going.
Yeah.
So at the same time, if you're in the smaller towns in America, man, my hat's off to the cigar retailers. We need these guys. These guys are important. The mom and pop shop that they are the only employee. Let me tell you, those guys work their tails off, because there's a saying, when you're a small business owner and you're the only employees, or you might have a lot of times you're chained to that business. When I say chained to business, when other people are taking vacations or going away for 3-day weekends and stuff, you're stuck working.
Yeah.
And so, I have mad respect for the small business guys out there with their retail cigar shops, because if you didn't have especially the ones that have lounges, if you didn't have a cigar shop, to me is like what a barber shop used to be in the old days. Guys hang out, smoke cigars, talk to each other, and actually interact instead of just staring at cell phones all day. So it's something to be said for that. And I'm glad we have it, and I'm glad that so many shops have asked, can we get FSG, and it took a while for us to to get the brand out nationally, and but now that partnering with Drew Estate and the brand's out, going to be going to the other cigar shops, to me that's a huge deal, because this was never intended for it to be, you can only buy a Corona cigar. Yeah. Even though that's reality, what it's been for the last year, that was never the intention of this. The intention of it was for it to be a product out there that's unique, that has something different that everybody can enjoy and other retailers can have as well. So we're finally seeing that happen. And, sometimes, we don't write business plans, but we have visions and it's coming together,
that's fantastic.
Do you know when the FSGs are going to be hitting retail at the Drew Diplomat shops across the country?
According to the guys at Drew Estate, they are shipping sometime this month. But I got to tell you, I've been in business for 20 years, and I say this all the time. Nicaraguan time and American time aren't always the same. It's
not the same thing.
Yeah. So,
I had a good friend from Cuba, and he had this famous quote. He said, people in Nicaragua and Cuba, Americans, you've got watches. People in Nicaragua and Cuba, they've got time.
Yep, that's true. That's true. So supposedly they'll be out this month.
Actually, On just updated me and it says they're shipping now, so they should be out this month.
Listen, I'll believe it when I see the retailers hold boxes. I got my FSG.
Post it on Facebook when you get your boxes in the cigar lounges and shops. Absolutely.
All right, and while you were answering the question before that, I did some random number generation to pick some of our winners here. So
those are some great questions. Thank you very much to all our audience.
If I say your name right now, first, thank you for asking a question. Thank you, everybody, for asking questions. And email me at Tripp, TRIPP, at cigarfederation.com, and I'll get your information over. So the winners are Ruben Goodblood, Chico Ray, Bob the Cigar Guy, Jose 302JH, and Cole Cruz. So send me your address and we'll get those prizes sent out to you.
Nice.
And make sure to post them on like Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, because I want to see what you got.
So Jeff, if they're going to tag you and obviously Florida Sungrown on Instagram, on Facebook, what should they tag on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter?
Instagram, it's at Corona Cigar Co. On Facebook, man, we've got 5 or 6 different ones there. They tag me personally on that one. Do Jeff Borysiewicz on Facebook. That'll be best. Listen, believe it or not, I'm the guy that does our social media. So when you see these pictures on Instagram, it's from me. And so the Facebook stuff, we share that with our marketing team, and they do a great job of that too. But the Instagram ones, it's me and this trusty old broken iPhone here, and it's just easier. And I see a lot of cool stuff, so I like to take pictures of it.
You're wearing a lot of hats, Jeff. A lot of hats.
Yeah. It's fun, though.
Labor of love.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We really appreciate it.
One quick thing, though.
One more thing? All right, go for it.
Here's the deal. I want to give a big shout-out to everybody that's ever worked at our farm in Claremont. We have a family, the Baraja family, that's been with me since we started. They do a fantastic job. And you know what was interesting? They never worked in tobacco before, right? They've been involved in agriculture, never been involved in tobacco. But we taught them. Here's the deal. I mean, when we have guys working at the farm, we give them cigars because we want them to understand what it is they're working on. There's a difference between a cigar and a cigarette, right? Most of these guys have never had a premium cigar in their life. So when you show them, here's the wrapper, here's the binder, here's the filler, this is what we're looking for. So our guys that work on the farm, they have bought into what, that we're all about quality. We're about making something great and something that gets enjoyed around the world. So that's number one. And second, we have a lot of different, because we're seasonal, right? We only grow tobacco in the spring. we've had substitute teachers. We've had all kinds of people out there that have worked just because they, hey man, they want to work on a farm. Because trust me, there's not a lot of farms to work on anymore, but they want to, they like doing that stuff. So I want to thank everybody that's ever worked at the FSG farm. And because let me tell you, it's hard ass work. It's crazy hard. It's crazy hot. But anyway, we get it done. And at the end, we make a great cigar.
Awesome.
Well, thanks again, everybody, for watching, listening, downloading the podcast, commenting, asking questions. We really appreciate you. Catch us next week. We'll be back with more sharing our pairings and more cigar chat.
Now I can smoke this.
Less talk and more